So, was Jonah really in the belly of a whale or a huge fish? How was that possible? You may have heard the story of Jonah and the whale, but did you know that God actually used this as a foreshadowing of what was going to happen with Jesus? Well, let's get into it. So in Matthew chapter 12, Jesus says to the Pharisees who wanted a sign from him, Jesus answers, "A wicked and adulterous generation asks for a sign, but none will be given except the sign of the prophet Jonah. For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of a huge fish, so the Son of Man will be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. The men of Nineveh will stand up at judgment with this generation and condemn it, for they repented at the preaching of Jonah, and now something greater than Jonah is here." So that right there was a slap in the face to those Pharisees who were of Israel, because the Ninevites were Gentiles, and he's saying even Gentiles listened to the preaching of Jonah, and they repented and turned to the God of Israel. Now, let's go back and read some verses from Jonah to see what Jesus was referring to. So right off the bat, God tells Jonah he needs to go to Nineveh to give a preaching of the word to the Ninevites. But instead, Jonah ran away and jumped on a ship in Tarshish. Anyway, to fast forward, there was a great storm. The boat was shaking and all the passengers on the ship were very scared. Jonah let them know it was because of his doing that God was angry with him and was causing the storm. Jonah let them know that it was of his doing why there was a storm, because God was angry with him. So he vowed to sacrifice himself by jumping off the ship, where we know the famous story of him getting swallowed by a great giant fish or sometimes whale. The end of chapter 1 ends with Jonah being in the belly of that whale for 3 days and for 3 nights, just like Jesus said he would be in the heart of the earth for 3 days and for 3 nights. So, was Jonah really in the belly of a whale or a huge fish? How was that possible? Well, maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. God can do anything he wants, so I have no objection of why that couldn't happen. However, we read in chapter 2, it says, "In Jonah's distress he called to the Lord, and he answered him. From the deep of the realm of the dead I called for help, and you listened to my cry." So Jonah's saying here he's in the realm of the dead, known as Sheol. So this gives us clues that Jonah was actually dead while he was in this belly of the fish or whale. A few verses later, Jonah talks about being sunk down and how the Lord brought his life back up from the pit. And we know that in biblical times, the pit was also referred to as the land of the dead or Sheol, what us modern folk would think of as hell. The end of chapter 2, Jonah talks about giving God a grateful sacrifice and praise because salvation is going to come from the Lord. Sounds a lot like Jesus, right? The last verse of chapter 2 says that Jonah is spit or vomited out of that fish. Despite all that happening, the last chapter in chapter 4 of Jonah, Jonah is still angry with the Lord. So Jonah ends up going to Nineveh, preaching to them what God had wanted, which was to repent and turn away from their wickedness so that they could be saved. Otherwise, he was going to cause destruction in so many days. And the Ninevites heard this, and they repented and turned back to the Lord. So you would think Jonah would be grateful. However, in the last chapter, he's pretty upset with God, saying that the Ninevites didn't deserve that grace from the Lord because of their wickedness that they had done. So, to summarize, how was Jonah a prophecy or foreshadowing of what was to come with Jesus? Well, just like Jesus, Jonah also had a mission from God to go preach to the lost, the Gentiles in Nineveh, so that they could turn away from their sins and repent and come to the one true God. And Jonah was also in Sheol, the land of the dead, for 3 days and for 3 nights, giving proclamation over the wicked spirits of the dead who were down there, letting them know that he was declaring victory over death and sin. So why would Jesus use this as an example to answer the Pharisees? Well, just like Jonah, who didn't think that the Gentiles deserved grace and mercy, Jesus was letting the Pharisees know that he had not come back only for Israel, but for everybody who was lost, including the Gentiles, who would have been like Nineveh back in Jonah's day. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. And if you want more content like this, hit that subscribe button.